Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Bledsoe. I'm a strategic advisor and lead the energy project at the Progressive Policy Institute. And today we're holding a virtual event on improving electricity transmission siting opportunities in the United States. We have a really terrific panel of experts who are going to be joining us, who I'll introduce in a minute. And then later in the hour, we expect Senator John Hickenlooper of Colorado, former governor of Colorado, and also a member of the Senate Energy Committee, to join us to tell us about action on Capitol Hill regarding transmission siting. But first, I want to introduce our really distinguished panel. Donnie Colston is the Director of Utilities for the IBEW and will provide employment and labor perspective today on this topic. We also have joining us Macky McCleary, who is an energy consultant and former Rhode Island state utility regulator, who can talk about the very important state perspective on siting. The states have most of the authority when it comes to electricity policy. Also with us today is Sue Tierney, a leading U.S. energy analyst and author of the recent National Academy of Sciences report on transmission siting. We're very lucky to have Sue with us today. Bob Kump is the president of Avangrid and can discuss details of a transmission line through Maine to New England that has gained national attention, and I think is a microcosm of the challenges we face regarding transmission siting. And then also joining us is Bill Parsons, who's Chief Operating Officer of the American Council on Renewable Energy, and can provide a business and perspective on the clean energy transition. Just a few remarks from me at the top. As most people know, President Biden has proposed an incredibly ambitious clean energy transition in the United States, including the goal of reaching all clean energy net zero, as it were, carbon energy by 2035. So in less than 15 years, most experts believe this is going to take a tremendous expansion of the power line capacity in the United States, but there are real obstacles there. So that's our topic today. And I wanted to start with you, Sue Tierney, as the author of the National Academy of Sciences report. Tell me what that report found about the challenges and the opportunities in electricity transmission siting today.
Well, I'm going to refer the audience to two different reports that I was honored to be part of. One of them was The Future of Electric Power in the United States, and the other was Accelerating the Decarbonization of the U.S. Energy System. Each of these two committees concluded that we just can't keep going as we have been going with regard to transmission siting. Paul, if you don't mind, let me just give you my point of view about this, and then I'll refer back to those reports. Because my own experience on transmission siting goes way back, and from the beginning of my career. And we know that transmission planning, siting, and permitting for reliability projects is pretty easy. I mean, easy in quotes. And nobody wants the lights to go out. So that puts a supercharger under the permitting process compared to projects that are designed to save consumers money and projects that are designed to support public policy in objectives. And we just cannot keep that approach that takes 10 to 15 years and sometimes just kills projects. Unfortunately, that's not going to get us to where we need to go as a nation and as consumers in states with carbon reduction and clean energy targets. The first project I was ever involved with was when I was in New England. I was a head of the Energy Facility Siting Board. And the first project was a high voltage DC line from Hydro-Quebec down through New Hampshire into Massachusetts. And this was pre-EPACT 1992, pre-unbundling of transmission and generation, pre-Order 2000, very high electricity costs driven by oil prices. And this line was designed to provide economic benefits for the consumers of New England. And it was, in an interesting way, it worked because the designers of the deal made sure that everyone benefited from the project. There was a sharing of the proceeds essentially from the savings, and everybody got a piece of the action, with a special side deal for those economically for those states that bore the siting of the project. That was really important. Let me just say these studies and our experience tells us that consumers in every state benefit, except for Texas, Hawaii, and Alaska. Every consumer in every state benefits from being part of an interstate grid. The initial studies of those of benefits of transmission typically do not look long enough or broadly enough at the benefits that flow. And every state with a clean energy plan is going to have to rely on an interstate grid. So today's approach won't get there. I want to commend FERC just at the outside for its advanced notice of proposed rulemaking that addresses key issues. Are there zones with rich renewables that we need to access and deliver to consumers? Do we need to look at portfolios of supply that could be met with different transmission targets? How broad are the benefits? Who should pay? All of those things are completely, clearly needed. And states have an important role here because they need to step up to broaden their own view about this regionalism of transmission systems. So let me just pass the ball back to you, Paul, and hope that this is going to be a lively discussion.
Thank you, Sue. That was a great overview of the challenges and the opportunities, as you say, including consumer opportunities. Bill Parsons, Sue alluded a little bit to it. Tell me how you view this scale of the transmission siting build out needed to meet the president's clean energy goals.
Yeah, Paul, thanks. Let me pick up where Sue left off. These really are the types of lines that we're talking about really are public goods. I mean, it's a rough analogy, but left equivalent to interstate highways. And if we go to pass the hat to get people to, ante up for interstate highways, whether we might still be building them, right? And so we have, just to give the listeners some context here, about 88% of the country's technical wind potential and close to 60%, 58% of the country's solar technical potential is between the 50 states between the Mississippi River and the Rockies. These are world-class resources, cheap. In 2050, only 30% of electricity demand is going to come from that area. We just have to resource to load. To your question, the estimates are around $300 billion in forward-looking investment to get the build out we need to effectively decarbonize the grid, to have the transmission necessary to decarbonize the grid. I just want to say, and I'm going to step back and let us jump in here. I think in terms of, Ways and Means markup started this morning. Energy and Commerce will be completing today in terms of its budget reconciliation package on subtitle D, the energy title. I don't know that I can say for sure that the policy proposals and the investments included here will get the entirety of that job done. That $300 billion is an aggregate public-private number. That's not just, so the public investment will leverage private dollars. But I think they ought to be commended. This is one of the most significant forward-looking policy proposals on transmission, certainly that I can remember. And it is a really solid start that we should commend Congress for and be supportive as we go forward to get this across the finish line.
Thanks, Donnie. Bill, rather, that's a very important point about the role of Congress. And a little later, we're going to hear from Senator Hickenlooper, who's going to tell us about efforts to expand the ability to site these power lines through increased federal authority. But it is remarkable, the clean energy expansion that is going on right now on Capitol Hill. And I think we should keep in mind that these goals are going to require this new level of transmission. So thank you, Bill. Donnie, I want to talk about the economic benefits of the clean energy transition generally and building of transmission lines specifically. I know the IBEW is intimately involved. Your workers around the country in doing this work. Tell us how you see the economic opportunities for different parts of the country and our workforce.
You know, Paul, this is a subject matter that's near and dear to my heart. And the reason I say that, having spent nearly 34 years as a lineman for Louisville Gas and Electric building transmission and distribution lines, clearly I understand the need for transmission, distribution, reliability and resiliency of the grid itself. But so this is a personal interest to me myself, and I've had the opportunity to testify twice on the Hill, specifically to transmission. But the IBEW, you have to understand the IBEW is 775,000 members. We have over 550,000 of our members get their direct income from energy. So each time that we talk about energy, it's a big impact on our membership. IBEW is 130 years old, and our members have been building transmission lines for over 100 years. And, President Biden has consistently talked about the clean energy transition and those blue collar union jobs that it will provide to workers. And IBEW is an example of exactly what he's talking about. You know, we think of the transmission grid as the foundation for all industry throughout the United States and Canada. These jobs are highly skilled, blue collar jobs with benefits. You can build as many renewables if you want to, anywhere you want to. But if you can't connect them to the load source through a transmission line, it's not going to help you. We think about the IBEW as an integral partner with our utilities in building and getting infrastructure built and operated. And we just like the rest of you here, we know that there's real challenges between the federal, state regulators, local government approval and siting and permitting. And this could take up to 10 years, as we was discussing earlier. But to meet the challenge that President Biden has laid out for us for CO2 emissions of reducing those by 100% by 2035, it's imperative that we're going to have to, in some way, shape, or form, reduce the amount of time that it takes to build electric transmission infrastructure. The IBEW itself, we're always evaluating and looking at the workforce needs and what training our members are going to need and what's the latest technology that we need to put into our apprenticeship programs. We have partnerships with our utilities, and together we have with our contractors as well, but together we have over 350 apprenticeship training facilities throughout the United States that specifically focus on skilled workforce issues, on how can we provide the workforce that's going to be needed. We anticipate that to build out the electric transmission system as it needs to be bid out, there's going to need to be at least 50,000 more linemen within the next 10 years. Just to give you a for instance of looking forward, it takes about 3 years to train a journeyman lineman. It's probably double that when you talk about a seasoned lineman, that one that doesn't have to follow direction right away, that just put your foot here and put your arm here, but it's twice the number of years to do that for the transmission and distribution system. Our partnerships that we have with Avangrid, as Bob would talk about here, building that clean energy line across Maine down into Massachusetts, is a prime example of the number of good clean energy jobs the IBEW is focused on, and what we're talking to the Hill about focusing on as well. We're talking about just that job that Avangrid has right there. That's 600 IBEW members that will get employment, 300 permanently after the line is built, but there's another additional 800 jobs involved with indirect jobs that are very advantageous to not only the IBEW, but a lot of the other skilled trades as well. And this, as I said earlier, This is the prime example of building out the system that President Biden has talked about, is in the clean energy transition and good union jobs. We think that with the federal government taking over the decision-making lead and market predictability will follow, we hope, as will our plans to provide provide the workers to build out the transmission system. But we know for a fact
Donnie,
that,
I was just going to say, I've seen statistics that the total number of jobs in the president's clean energy and climate plan could be more than 8 million. And so but as Bill said so eloquently, the highway to move this energy has to be built. It has to be built expeditiously, and it has to have lower costs so consumers benefit. And I know your workers are a key aspect of that. I want to turn to Macky McCleary and talk a little bit about the state role. We've talked so far about expanding federal authority, perhaps, and I think Senator Hickenlooper may touch on that later. But Macky, I want to hear about your perspective from the states on what the states can do and the economic and consumer benefits that the clean energy transmission expansion can bring.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, thank you. I'm excited to have this conversation. This is something that's been near and dear to my heart for my whole career. So the relationship between the states and the federal government, all the other stakeholders, is complicated. I think at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is a confluence of challenges and opportunities that are presented to stakeholders at every level, not just the state and the federal. We have to also think about landowners. We have to think about large commercial facilities, low-income residents, the regional transmission organizations, the RTOs. There's a lot of people, a lot of interest involved in this. And in many ways, at the state level is where sort of everything converges, right? So the federal government can see the state, the local citizenry can see the state, and it puts a lot of pressure on state regulators and policymakers in a situation where they don't always have all of the regulatory authority, even though both the economic benefit and challenges impact them. And so I think a short answer to your question is that the relationship between the state and the federal policymakers should be as intimate as possible. But going back to what I thought Susan did a great job of laying out, the path to success is an outcome in which all of the stakeholders benefit. And that's across, there's a broad set of policy outcomes that are possible as a result of the construction of transmission. And just to kind of level set what we're talking about, the existing transmission system is a wonder of the world. It is a gigantic thinking machine in which every single generator is rotating at 3,600 RPM all the time. We don't store power in any specific way. So we have to move the electrons. It's amazing. And what we're actually stating is that that amazing thing is 100% obsolete in 20 years. And we have to build another one on top of that that is smarter, bigger, faster, and more productive than the one that exists. That's an extraordinary challenge. And I agree with all the other panelists that it's wonderful to see the federal government beginning to step up to meet that challenge as a state regulator. Or I have to say, you know, for 10 or so years there, it was a real challenge as a state regulator, wondering where the federal government was, or whether it even existed sometimes. But I think we have a real opportunity here as a network of interested parties and a moment where if no action is taken, the outcome will be catastrophic for both our goals and for the subsequent generations. But it appears as though we are pulling ourselves together to do it. And it gives me great pride to be part of that.
Thank you, Macky. You know, it's such an important point that we have the technologies now to capture these huge benefits, public health benefits, climate change benefits, reductions in consumer costs, that the technologies have improved, but now we need a way to put them in place deliver those benefits to average Americans. And that's where I think the siting issue, is where, to continue Bill's analogy, the rubber meets the road. Bob Kump, I wanted to talk to you as someone who's deeply involved in a specific transmission line effort in Maine and into New England. Tell us about your experience of the difficulties of getting these lines up and running to benefit consumers in a way that limits costs and provides the most benefit.
Sure, and thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. And Sue, I have to say, 2 points that you made resonated really well for me, and I wrote them both down. One is, you mentioned one of the first projects you worked on was a DC line from Quebec into New England, and the concept of everyone needs to be a winner for these to be successful, because those really are important points. But where we are in New England right now, and Sue, you know this better probably than I do, but it still relies heavily on natural gas. On any given day, more than half of the generation of electrons is through natural gas. And the states have had very strong RPS standards, and we're looking to obviously decarbonize. And Massachusetts got out in front of this a number of years ago and put out RFPs both for onshore and for offshore renewables. And as it related to the onshore, there was a project, DC, coming from Quebec, which has a tremendous amount of hydro resources, through New Hampshire into New England. And that project ultimately saw tremendous opposition. A lot of it was grassroots, but a lot of it also was the generators in the region, particularly ones that are merchant, that stood to lose millions of dollars a day when 1,200 megawatts of clean energy was introduced into New England. So when that was defeated, our project was put to the fore as the next successful project in that RFP. Very similar concept. It's a 1,200 megawatt DC line from Quebec, working with Hydro-Quebec through Maine into New England. It's fully paid for by consumers in Massachusetts. It would produce a reduction of over 3 million metric tons of CO2, the equivalent of taking 700,000 cars off the road. So we had been planning this several years before the RFP in Massachusetts. And I'm pleased to say that over the course of about 2.5 years, we fully permitted the project. We had absolutely strong support from each of the agencies, both from a federal and a state perspective, given just the importance of this project to New England. Because if you think about all the other variable generation, clean energy that's coming on, and most notably, offshore wind, that's going to really create as a game changer for the sector and for New England. That project just makes so much sense, because we call it, if you would, the battery for New England to allow for all those intermittent resources. So we got it fully permitted. We started construction in January. The issue has been behind a grassroots effort, again, are the largely fossil fuel generators in New England that are fighting this tooth and nail, because this project would reduce energy prices by I think the number is close to 20 billion over the next 20 years. I mean, it's a huge reduction when you introduce 1,200 megawatts of clean energy. And so they actually are using the system in Maine to put out referendums to try to kill the project, despite the fact that we have all of the permits. They tried one a couple of years ago. We were fortunate enough to defeat that because it was unconstitutional. We went to the highest court in the state of Maine and was defeated. But now they have another one on the slate for vote this November. And this one looks to retroactively change laws that existed under which we got our permits to again look to kill the project. So Sue, to your point, we were really careful when we put this together to minimize environmental impact. So 2/3 of the 150 miles in Maine are on existing corridor. 1/3 is new corridor. However, it runs through a commercial forest. So we worked with the governor, who's been incredibly supportive of Governor Mills, and we put together a benefits package of over 250 million for consumers. We also are allocating a portion of the output from the line because the DC converter is in Lewiston, Maine, and the state of Maine will get discounted energy from that. But if you look at it, the one group that doesn't benefit is the existing generators in the region that stand to lose millions of dollars a day. And that's the piece that's fighting this. And this is the piece even beyond siting that I think we need to deal with. Again, we've gotten tremendous.
Thank you for that illustration of the challenge, Bob. And it's a really important point, right? We need to recognize that the clean energy transition is going to mean that there are industries that are going to be impacted, and we have to take them into consideration. And Donnie, I want to turn to you on that topic. Studies generally show that these investments are overall going to create huge numbers of new jobs, far more than would be lost by industries that will be less competitive, and that these are good paying jobs. Can you talk about how this transition is going to benefit the average worker and the economy in the transition away from the fossil fuel industry?
Well, to think back of the transmission of how it moves forward right now, for when I talked about earlier our partnership with our utility partners and our apprenticeship training programs, clearly the IBEW and our utilities can't hire 10,000 linemen unless there are jobs to put them into. So that foresight of saying for the IBEW on our training programs is knowing that there's going to be a job for that worker. We clearly don't want to bring them into our apprenticeship hall and say, okay, we're going to give you 3 to 5 years worth of training, and oh, by the way, we don't have a job for you. So, but keeping all that in mind, just think of the 22 projects right now that are moving forward, just those would create, the most estimate is about 1.2 million jobs for 22 projects that are up and ready to go right now. That's a $23 billion investment that could pan out to 100 million from what the report said. And these are the type of jobs that President Biden's talking about, clean energy transition jobs. In other words, we can take our power plant operator from a fossil fuel, we can make that person a transmission or distribution line person, or mechanic or electrician, and we can move them right over to those clean. That's the job transition of the discussion we're having with where are the jobs at. This is one of those places that those are where the jobs are at.
Donnie, that's such an important point, that you have programs in place to help workers transition from fossil fuels toward clean energy. I think it can't be said often enough. Sue, I want to get back to the nature of the grid today. I see that the American Society of Engineers gave the current grid a C-. It obviously has tremendous attributes, but as Macky pointed out, it's just not made for the 21st century yet. And I see in the National Academy of Sciences report that you said that we need a new kind of high voltage interstate system to really capture the benefits of the clean energy transition. How do you envision that system? What are the benefits?
Well, the system needs to be expanded and modernized in ways that my colleagues on the panel today have talked about. One of them has to do with making sure that we connect broader regions together. So one of the best tools for doing that is the high voltage direct current technology, which has been a proven technology in Europe and in the United States already, as Bob described. That enables a lot of transfer very efficiently of power, and it can move in different directions and under the control of grid operators. Who said that it was a big battery? Was that Macky or was that Bob? I mean, that is really what we can start to do, which will be needed with a system with much more variable resources like wind and solar in place. But additionally, it needs to be resilient and cyber secure. Yesterday's grid was built 100 years ago, 90 years ago, 80 years ago. I mean, we have a very old and wonderful grid, but it needs to be at least doubled in terms of its carrying capacity, if not tripled. The accelerating decarbonization report that I mentioned from the National Academies Committee identified that one could expect to need to have it be tripled in size. And that is also assuming that we develop abundant decentralized resources. We still need to connect these very large regions. So it needs to be resilient. It needs to be broader to capitalize on the diversity of loads and supplies. So there are a lot of changes that are needed, and great minds have been put together to think about how to solve some of these problems. And I would just do a shout out again to Chairman Glick at FERC, who has invited state representatives to join together in conversations about how to overcome many of these very challenging siting issues that Macky described.
Thank you, Sue. It's a good shout out to.
If I could just add on to that,
Go ahead, please.
you think about the right of ways that it takes right now for AC versus DC. There's smaller right of ways. You can run longer distances with less infrastructure in place. But the system was built by 100 plus utilities. That's why it's a spider web. No one envisioned a national grid. They built the transmission system to only service the customers that they had. It was through the foresight of saying we can increase reliability and resiliency if we tie that grid together. So that's where we're starting at.
That's a really important, Donnie. I wanted to turn back to Bill, Bill Parsons, if I can. Bill, I see the Department of Energy report that said that solar power could power 40% of U.S. electricity by 2035, but buried in the fine print in that report was the need for a huge expansion of high voltage power lines to make that happen. I know your members are the companies who are producing this power and making sure it gets delivered. Tell us about the challenge for wind and solar and transmission.
Yeah, well, I want to share a story I heard from Barbara Sugg, who runs the Southwest Power Pool, and she was relating to an ACOR audience how during Winter Storm Uri, everybody will recall that, particularly in Texas, it was a huge, in some cases, catastrophic shutdown there. And she said, it was tough for us too, but because we were able to pull power from PJM through MISO into SPP, we kept the lights on in over 5 million homes. And it's just like climate change, it's not a tomorrow issue. This is a today issue. So where we have functionality, we're already seeing the benefit, and where we don't, we're seeing the harm. This anecdote is further supported. I'll share, Paul, we were talking ahead of this session on the consumer, right? So rubber meets the road where you hit the consumer, and what the consumer, increasingly, I think people understand that the costs of inaction are just catastrophically high. And so we do need to be decarbonizing on a sort of scientifically grounded timetable. What the modeling does show, and you just start with the idea that one of the solar and wind, for example, are intermittent sources of power, but they also have an inherent advantage because there's no fuel supply. So over time, there's no cost to that, right? And so they're going to have an inherent advantage over time. The second thing, I think Susan and others brought this out, and it's once it's sort of described, I think it makes eminent sense to people, is there are two things that happen when you can draw from power sources from a broader footprint. The first is, the grid is in many places and ought to be, when we're done with this exercise, bigger than any weather pattern, right? So that if you have sun shining or clouds or wind not blowing or whatever, you have a broad enough grid to draw from where the weather pattern is varied enough that you're going to have contributions regardless across the grid that you're covered.
That's a great point.
Any grid operator will tell you is, if I can pull, and I'm speaking as a grid operator, if I got greater access to low cost resources, like I can do my balancing on the most cost effective basis if you give me more choice. And that choice is provided by the interconnectivity that the 21st century transmission build out we need will provide.
That's a really interesting point about how consumers are going to benefit in both reliability and in cost over time. Go ahead.
Let me just, and I'll just 12 seconds, just in terms of like some, Susan's obviously, this is her lane, but in terms of some academic stuff that back this up, the NREL SEAM study, in a decarbonization scenario, you get $47 billion of annual savings from the transmission build out to do this, which is about $2.50 return for every dollar invested. And the CLAC study said you can get to 80% decarbonization through transmission build out alone.
Oh, no, turn on.
It's just stuff to think about. I see the senator may have arrived.
Senator Hickenlooper, thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. Don't see, I think you may be muted for the moment, so there you are. Can you hear us, sir? I think you are muted.
Yes, there I am. I was trying to figure out how to unmute, and we're having some Wi-Fi challenges here in the Senate office, so I apologize.
Not at all, sir. It's great to see you again, and thanks for making the time to talk about this today. I've been talking to this panel of experts about how many jobs, how much economic activity is going to be created by this clean energy transition, and what an amazing opportunity it is for average Americans to get good clean energy jobs, but how this transmission issue may prevent fully accomplishing that vision. And knowing of your leadership when you were governor in Colorado and now on Senate Energy Committee, I want to get your perspective on the big picture here of what's at stake for average Americans in our competitiveness, employment, reducing consumer costs, and addressing climate change.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate all the work that the Progressive Policy Institute's been doing on this for so long, much longer than I have. And I think, you all obviously have already laid out the imperative, right? That climate change, we're well past the point of debating, how real is this threat and how significant is this threat? It's real, it's significant. If there was ever a year that demonstrated that, it's this year and this summer. Hurricanes, fires, etc. So once you accept that, then it's important to do just what you're doing, is laying out the economic groundwork of how this actually is going to be a stimulant for the economy and not, take away jobs, but expand jobs. And that allows us to really begin saying, all right, once you accept those things, which I think, you've kind of laid the groundwork already today, you have to see what are the bottlenecks that could slow this whole process down. And I think that's going to be the kind of technical and engineering challenges that we face right now. And one of those big bottlenecks that I just want to take a minute to talk about is transmission, and the importance of making sure that we have a grid that is ready for what we need it to do. And the recent Princeton study, I'm sure you guys have all seen that, say that we need to triple, literally triple the transmission infrastructure by 2050. That's a crazy ambitious goal if we're really going to decarbonize it, that we're going to have to triple this thing. But I think it's the key is that we can't just generate clean energy in pockets. We're going to have to generate clean energy and get it where it needs to go efficiently. and that's got to happen very rapidly. And I think, there are lots of benefits from this. It's going to provide revenue and jobs in rural communities. In other words, this is going to really tie together the country. We're going to have the opportunity to, again, create inexpensive as well as clean energy for consumers. And again, by investing in transmission and the grid, we're going to get a level of resiliency that, based on what we've seen this year, is sorely lacking in the existing system. So I think, there are a lot of challenges getting here. We've seen modeling coming out of NREL, the National Renewable Energy Labs, which of course I'm always proud to give
Colorado,
them,
yes.
they're Colorado. But the big benefit cost ratios come from these, interregional high capacity transmission systems with the largest benefits with a high percentage of clean energy, as the major contributing factor. Obviously, one of the big issues here is the siting challenges that go from state to state. And this has been, true for so long and in so many parts of our infrastructure where you run the risk of, NIMBYs really fighting back against in my backyard, questions about the efficiency of the investments, trying to figure out what are the key most important aspects of the infrastructure investment. And I think one solution here, which Senator Whitehouse and Senator Heinrich have kind of united around, there's a little bit of a square dance there to get to that negotiation. But I'm a co-sponsor with them as in the goal of establishing a new siting authority at FERC for large interstate transmission lines, which would give transmissions some level of parity with how we do things for natural gas pipelines, again, which aren't perfect. This is called the Site Act, and it would allow, the ability to create these high priority interstate transmission systems, but at the same time, make sure we have robust protections for private landholders, which isn't in some of the other FERC issues. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, what's it called now? Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. If the Senate keeps changing names of these things, it's going to be the end of me. But anyway, what I call the bipartisan infrastructure bill has clarifying language in it that I think will lay out protections around this, but also allow us to see that this is something that is crucially important. It's got to be a very, very high priority. And again, I've seen this in Colorado and I think all across the country where crucial small segments can be jeopardized and held up through really someone is trying to hold the entire project hostage for one reason or another. And again, if you believe that climate change is serious, we have to give our institutions like FERC some level of authority to aggressively solve these disputes, and it's got to be in real time. So anyway, that's within these high priority corridors that have been identified by the Department of Energy. We need to be able to push as fast as we can to get resolution. So that's my pitch today. Talk to me tomorrow. I'll have another priority.
Not at all, sir. I know you've been at this for a long time, and thank you, honestly, for your leadership, both within the Senate Energy Committee in getting some provisions in, as you say, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and then the even more ambitious effort in the Site Act, along with Senators Heinrich and Whitehouse. That's very important leadership. And the thing is, I know from our work together when you were governor that Colorado has had incredible benefits, economic benefits, consumer benefits from the expansion of clean energy. tell me a little bit about the Colorado Miracle on clean energy and how you see it as a model for the country.
Well, you know, we were and this was before I got into the state government, back when I was still the mayor of Denver. But we were the first state to go out and have the voters pass clean energy standards. And I don't think we really appreciated at the time how significant that would be, not just to, cleaning up our carbon emissions, but really stimulating our economy. And there are a lot of arguments about how much credit do those clean energy standards deserve for the overall economy. But I think it's beyond dispute that there was a sense of momentum and forward momentum that getting that passed and then beginning to implement it really made a huge difference. And then since then, we've, while I was governor, we pushed those standards out, not quite as ambitious and aggressive, but into the rural co-ops. And originally they pushed back pretty hard on some of those efforts. But within 4 or 5 years, now we have the co-ops coming back to us and wanting to go and be more ambitious, because one of the great benefits of having a citizen-led initiative that was passed at the ballot meant that we really allowed the people of Colorado to understand the issue and how important it is. And in Colorado, every poll continues to show increasing appreciation of climate change as a challenge, and a continuing expansion of understanding that you have to have things like clean energy standards where government is really adding push to accelerate the transition that's already happening. And I think within Colorado, the level of job creation by any measure now, we're up well over 60,000, I think 80,000 jobs was one of the last estimates I saw of new jobs created in this transition to a clean energy economy. That's meaningful. And again, if we begin feathering in the investments into the grid and transmission with the actual generation of the energy, and then I think we also should be looking at the remediation of the old sources of pollution. So mines, oil and gas wells, methane leakages, those kinds of things. And we really begin addressing those sources of carbon emissions. Then we are in a place where we are clearly net positive in jobs, and net positive in jobs in rural areas. And in some of the states hardest hit by this transition, or at least they perceive they're the hardest hit, like, West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, some of those coal intensive states.
That's a great point, sir. I know that you were one of those responsible for $16 billion in the bipartisan infrastructure bill for the remediation of these older mines, these abandoned wellheads and others. That's a very important program. And I think the president has mentioned it several times as a critical step in the transition for those workers. So, thank you for your leadership. It occurs to me, sir, that Colorado is kind of emblematic of the challenges that the nation faces. We have the challenges of the Colorado River, whose flows are diminishing because of climate change. You have the challenges of wildfires in the West and in Colorado, but then you have the opportunity to create, as I remember, unemployment with 2% when you left, really created an economic miracle there. And I really think that you're sort of a national emblem of what we can do if we put our minds to it. And I want you to talk a little bit about how you see the long-term future if we're able to act on climate change, with clean energy, and with transmission siting, and how is this really going to make our country stronger economically, environmentally, and in terms of public safety?
Sure. And I guess what I'll cut to the chase, because I think everything that Colorado did is essential. And that's how you build momentum, is finding incremental changes you can make, something here, something there. But the more I get deeper and deeper, and this is the great thing about the US Senate, is your responsibility, my responsibility as a senator, is to go deeper and deeper on the most important issues. I don't have to go out and kiss babies. I don't cut ribbons at the opening of a new bridge. I'm supposed to go deeper and deeper, and I can't help but see that we need to put a price on carbon. When I came into the Senate, I was told by almost everybody, no, we've tried that, and there's no way that's going to get passed. Well, just in the last 10 months since I've been in the Senate, public opinion continues to move that needle. And if you want to really look at how we're ever going to succeed against climate change, it's not going to happen if all we do are these incremental changes. These incremental changes have to build the foundation so that we get, and my preference is a fee and dividend, and maybe we take some allocation, maybe we don't dividend it all back, but make sure that everybody comes out positive. Or the vast majority of working people come out positive.
And that's a program where Americans would get a check every year for any extra taxes that they face on energy. Is that right, sir?
Yeah, even every month. I think it probably works better as a monthly check that people get that compensates them for the increases in price on all sorts of things that use energy to be manufactured or delivered, however. And that what we do then in that fee and dividend is we really incentivize and motivate industry, but the small businesses, the large businesses of America, to find ways of building things, manufacturing things, transporting things using less energy. And and this is originally a Republican. George Shultz is the person who persuaded me the benefits of this back in 1997, no, it wasn't 1997, 2007, where he kind of opened my eyes to this. But that systemic opportunity is out there in front of us. And I can't tell you how many Republican senators are reconsidering this. And all, the American Petroleum Institute now is in favor of putting a price on carbon. United Airlines has been strident coming out in favor of this. A lot of the largest corporations. Now, they're not yet, even the, Mobil Exxon says they're in favor of a price on carbon. They're not yet threatening or pushing Republican legislators to get active on this. That's the next big step. But I think we're making tremendous progress. And as that happens, I think it will unlock, just a cavalcade of benefits in terms of economic growth, job creation, environmental cleansing, right, of our air, the air we breathe, the water. All these things are byproducts of directly confronting climate change in such a way that we can actually win that battle.
It's such a good point about the rise in bipartisan interest. For a while, it did seem like the Republican Party, former President Trump, did not have much interest in this issue, but 19 of your Republican colleagues supported the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Can you talk a little bit, just to close us out today, about the bipartisan support for the transmission siting agenda that you've encountered in the Senate, and how the economic benefits might be able to truly turn the building of the clean energy transition into a bipartisan effort?
Well, I was part of that group of, in the end, it was 22 Democrats and Republicans, 11 Democrats, 11 Republicans, that negotiated that bipartisan bill. And it was a wonder to watch. You talk about muscles atrophy after a certain period of non-use. Well, that's a little bit true of our democratic system here. And it was magical to watch this muscle. There's muscle memory there, and people negotiating in good faith and really listening to each other. And I don't think there's a single person among those 22 senators who's totally happy with that bill. But the fact that we've got, and I don't even have it in front of me, whatever it was, $64 billion for transmission, major investments for electric vehicle recharging stations across the country. I mean, these are, transformative investments that allow us to really dramatically move forward in addressing climate change. And that was discussed in those terms in those meetings. So without question, we have 11 Republicans that took a stand there. And then obviously another 5 or 6 or 7 Republicans agreed to vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill when it came onto the floor. I'm an incurable optimist. I'm a former entrepreneur. It's in my DNA to be optimistic, but I think there are a lot of grounds for optimism here in what we're seeing, at least being discussed and put forward in the Senate, that this can lead to hopefully accelerating change.
Well,
Hey, Paul,
sir,
Paul, I
yes,
want to
please, go ahead,
interrupt
Sue, please.
because Senator, I moved from New England to Colorado 5 years ago. I am so proud that you are my senator. Thank you so much for your leadership on these issues.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
That's Sue Tierney, Senator Hickenlooper. Well, listen, thanks so much for your time and your incredible insight and work on these issues. And I think leaving us with that hopeful note is really the right way to think about it. If we can just capture the benefits of these technologies, this is going to make the country richer, more secure, cleaner, and safer. And your leadership is just such a central part of that. We know that the siting of transmission is a key part of it. Thank you for your work on this. And thank you everyone in the audience. Sorry we didn't get to more of your questions, but we promise to do this again soon. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you again, Senator Hickenlooper, Progressive Policy Institute, Paul Bledsoe. Great to see you all, and have a good afternoon. Thanks very much.